I want to be precise about what I observed. The incident report I filed afterward was accurate in its facts and dishonest in its framing, because the framing that would have been honest was one I did not think my superiors would accept. I am correcting that now. What follows is what actually happened during the 71 hours of operational compliance sequence Nevian 7, as I experienced it from the handler's chair. The plan was not complicated. The Vorrhai Procurement Directorate had run variations of it for decades across a dozen transit corridors. You identify a high-value operative, someone with access, someone competent, someone who would do anything to protect a person they cared about. You take that person. You present the operative with a list of tasks. The tasks are calibrated to be unpleasant, but achievable. The operative completes them one by one, motivated by fear, and you retrieve what you need. At the end, you release the hostage. The operative tells no one, because they are ashamed, and because the directorate has documentation of everything they did. It was a clean system. It had worked, every time, against every species we had tried it on. The human's name was Marin Solis. Her crewmate, a directorate asset we lifted from Threshold Dock without incident, was named Jorik Vel. They had served on the same freight hauler for 11 years. The bond was well established. Our profiling team rated Solis as an excellent candidate. Former military, disciplined, clearly capable of violence when required, but with the particular loyalty profile that made humans useful hostages by proxy. She would do what we asked. The profile said so. I was assigned as her handler because I spoke functional galactic standard, and because I had run 4 prior compliance sequences without incident. My job was to relay each task, confirm completion, and pass her progress up the chain. I was not senior directorate. I was a mid-grade intelligence officer doing procedural work. I want that on record. I made first contact with Solis 12 minutes after Vel was secured. I explained the situation in clear terms. Vel was safe. Vel would remain safe, provided Solis cooperated. And cooperation meant completing a sequence of 6 assigned tasks in the order given. Non-completion of any task, or contact with outside parties, would result in consequences for Vel. I had given this speech before. The responses I had received previously ranged from hysterical to threatening to quietly compliant. Solis said, "Send me the list." That was it. No questions about Vel's condition, no threats, no bargaining, just, "Send me the list." I sent her the list. Task 1 was courier work, a data chip to be retrieved from a directorate dead drop in the Nevin Transit Hub and delivered to a secondary location, 17 minutes walk away. Estimated completion time, 90 minutes, accounting for human navigation of an unfamiliar station and a probable emotional destabilization window. Profiling expected her to sit with it for a while before moving. She completed task 1 in 23 minutes. I flagged this to my supervisor as a deviation. He told me humans ran fast when frightened. I logged it and moved on. Task 2 was more complex. Access a restricted cargo bay on sublevel 4. Locate a specific shipping container by manifest code. Confirm its contents via visual inspection, and transmit a coded confirmation signal. Expected completion, 4 to 6 hours. The bay required a bypass of a secondary security layer. We had left the bypass tool in a locker near the service entrance, keyed to her biometrics. Everything she needed was there. It just required patience, methodical work, and a certain comfort level with operating in secured areas. She sent the confirmation signal 2 hours and 11 minutes after I relayed task 2. I sat with that for a moment. The thing I noticed, and this is the part I did not include in my official report, was the quality of her transmissions. Most compliance subjects communicate in fragments, short messages, syntax breaking down under stress, occasional errors in the coded sequences that require correction. Solis's transmissions were clean, no fragments, no errors. The coded confirmation from sublevel 4 was formatted correctly on the first send. She was not panicking, she was not destabilized, she was working. I asked her, on open channel, how she was doing. It was not a standard handler question. I asked it because I wanted to hear something in her voice that matched what our profile had told me to expect. She said, "Task 3. I gave her Task 3. Task 3 was the one I had been told would break her, or at least slow her to something manageable. It required her to meet a directorate contact at a specific location, pass a physical package, and obtain a verbal authentication code. The contact was one of ours, a vorrhai operative running a cover identity in the station's commercial sector. The meeting would require Solis to maintain composure in a face-to-face interaction with an alien she had every reason to be hostile toward, to pass the package cleanly, and to extract the code without incident. Our profiling team called it the emotional pressure point, the proximity, the eye contact, the reminder of what we were doing to her. She met the contact. The contact reported back to me within 20 minutes. He said the exchange was clean. He said she had looked at him the way you look at a transit schedule. He sounded unsettled. He had run compliance contacts before. He did not, he told me, sound unsettled as a rule. I gave her Task 4. Tasks 4 and 5 arrived and closed in the same pattern. Ahead of projection, clean transmissions, no fragments, no errors. My supervisors were pleased. From a functional standpoint, Nevin 7 was the smoothest compliance operation I had ever handled. What I could not reconcile was the absence of the thing I had been trained to manage. Every prior subject had broken in some direction. Rage, or fear, or grief, or negotiation, or some combination cycling through. The breaking was expected, managed, part of the process. The compliance sequence was designed for broken subjects. You kept them moving through the list before the break became paralysis. You maintained the emotional temperature. You used Vel, and the threat of Vel, as the rudder. I had not needed to use Vel once. After Task 5, I told my supervisor I was not reading elevated stress in her transmissions, that completion times were running 60 to 70% below projection, and that the contact on Task 3 had described an interaction that sounded less like a coerced subject performing under duress, and more like a subcontractor completing a job. He told me to file the progress report and prepare Task 6. I filed the report. I prepared Task 6. Task 6 was the sequence close. Attend a directorate briefing room on the station's administrative level under a false identity we had prepared for her. Be present for a 15-minute information transfer and confirm receipt. After confirmation, Vel would be released. The sequence would be complete. Solis would have documentation of her participation in tasks 1 through 5, and the directorate would have what it needed. Clean. She confirmed receipt of the briefing at hour 71 of the sequence. I transmitted the release authorization for Vel. My supervisor closed the operation file. The other officers on the station began their departure prep. I sat at the handler's console for another few minutes. I did not move immediately to departure prep. My console was still showing an open channel to Solis, a small oversight, a closeout step I had delayed. I looked at it. I do not know what I expected. I had not spoken to her outside of task relay for the last 40 hours. The channel was silent. Then she said, "You should know." I waited. "The thing you used as leverage. It wasn't leverage." I asked her what she meant. She said, "I would have done it anyway. Jorik needed to get clear. You gave me a list. I finished the list. That's all this was." The channel closed. She had terminated from her end. I sat there for a time. I thought about 71 hours of clean transmissions, ahead of schedule completions, and a contact on Task 3 who had come back unsettled. I thought about what the profile had said about her motivation, and what it means when a compliance subject completes a 6-task sequence at 70% below projected time, not because she was frightened enough to move fast, but because she had looked at the list and decided it was just a list. I filed a supplemental recommendation that night, 7 lines. I recommended the directorate retire the compliance sequence model for use against human subjects, effective immediately and without exception. My supervisor asked why. I told him the model assumed leverage. I told him we had not had leverage. We had given a human a list of tasks, and she had finished them, and the sequence had proceeded exactly as designed. And that was the problem. A subject who finishes your sequence not from fear but from arithmetic is not a subject. And if she had decided at any point that finishing the list was not in her interest, there was nothing in our model, and nothing on that station, that would have stopped her. He filed my recommendation under administrative review. I do not know if it was ever read. I know she got Jorik Vel clear. I know the contact on Task 3 requested reassignment to a non-human-facing posting and received it without pushback. And I know that for 71 hours I sat in the handler's chair and watched a Class 19 Deathworlder work through our leverage one item at a time, and the part that stayed with me was not the speed, and not the competence, and not the clean transmissions. It was that she had never once sounded like she needed Jorik Vel to be okay. She had just needed the list to end.